Coming up, Alpha News reveals that a convicted sex offender works for the Minnesota Department of Education, tasked with auditing taxpayer spending and overseeing internal accountability. You can't make this stuff up. We follow up from commentary yesterday regarding the openly socialist mayoral candidate in New York City, Zohran Mamdani, after President Trump threatens to arrest the man if he interferes with deportation efforts. We'll continue our ongoing conversation about what contributes to political violence. Is it really our rhetoric, or is it the substance of what is being proposed for public policy? Finally, after we discussed whether it's a good idea to change the census to only count citizens, President Trump today called for precisely that. So we'll circle back. And for X-Subscribers, YouTube channel members, and audio podcast subscribers, you can find today's edition of The Smoke-Filled Room, where I contemplate the future of the pro-life movement in a context where the culture seems to have largely embraced abortion. Welcome to Closing Argument.
4, 3, 2. Closing Argument with Walter Hudson.
I don't think of myself as naive, but there are still certain things that I would like to take for granted. One of those things is that the state of Minnesota would not hire a convicted sex offender to serve in any role whatsoever, let alone overseeing financial accountability for a state agency. But that's exactly what the Walz administration apparently did, according to recent reporting from Alpha News. Here's the story. A Kenyan national convicted of sexually assaulting a sleeping woman in Minnesota wasn't deported after his prison sentence. He was promoted. Wilson Tindy holds a director position at the Minnesota Department of Education, where he audits taxpayer spending and oversees internal accountability. Court records show Tindy was convicted in 2016 of fourth-degree criminal sexual conduct after breaking into a woman's home and assaulting her in bed where she slept. He pleaded guilty to the sex assault charge in exchange for prosecutors dropping a first-degree burglary charge. Tindy was sentenced to 2 years in prison and ordered to register as a predatory offender. His sentence was stayed for 5 years, but he was also sentenced to 210 days in the workhouse, records show. However, despite the felony conviction and offender status, Tindy serves as Director of Internal Audit and Advisory Services at MDE, according to public records and his LinkedIn profile. After Alpha News reached out to MDE for comment, Tindy's bio was removed from the agency's website. A former prosecutor with direct knowledge of Tindy's case told Alpha News that they were disturbed to learn he now holds a leadership role in state government. I don't know how he would have passed a background check, the attorney said. He's a felon and a registered sex offender. How is he employed? The attorney said that in addition to the 2016 conviction, Tindy was also accused of a similar crime in 2012, as court documents state. Although the case was never charged, prosecutors filed a Springle notice, a legal move to introduce evidence of prior misconduct, citing the 2012 allegation as evidence of a disturbing pattern. He is dangerous, the attorney said. He has no business being paid out of our taxpayer dollars and should be back with ICE. Records show Tindy was taken into ICE custody in August of 2016 as the U.S. government sought to deport him to his native Kenya. In 2016, an immigration judge ordered his removal based on the felony sex crime conviction. The decision was later upheld by the Board of Immigration Appeals, but stayed by an appeals court. Tindy filed a federal habeas corpus petition arguing that his detention had become unconstitutional because it dragged on too long without actual deportation. A federal judge agreed, writing that Tindy's continued detention no longer served the purpose of preventing deportable criminal aliens from fleeing prior to or during their removal proceedings. After 18 months in ICE custody, Tindy was ordered released in February of 2018. This revelation highlights the end result of both Democrat policy and their warped worldview. While questions remain to be answered, my assumption at this point is that whoever made the decision to hire Tindy knew exactly what they were doing. The department came out with a statement today claiming that they would, quote, get this sicko out, unquote. And that's all well and good, but it doesn't address the more urgent concern of how this sicko, as they acknowledge him, got hired in the first place. Whoever is responsible for making that decision should also be out. And if there's a systemic reason why this abhorrent hiring decision was made, everyone associated with that process should lose their job as well, including any connected elected officials. This is not a story that should fade away. It demands follow-up and substantive action. For my part, I'll be working to ensure that follow-up occurs to the best of my ability as a state representative here in Minnesota. Yesterday, our headline topic on the program was the open socialism of Zohran Mamdani, the Democrat nominee for mayor of New York City. Mamdani may be the most flagrantly avowed socialist politician that the United States has ever seen. He has no apparent reservation about prescribing totalitarian tyranny, going so far as to admit that his end goal is seizing the means of production. And as we discussed yesterday, that should probably be recognized as a call for the enslavement of Americans. After all, the means of production are people. People create products and services. So if you're going to seize the means of production, that means you're going to seize people. Under socialism, you have no control over what you produce or for what price, and that's the literal definition of slavery. If I can't decide what I do, what I make, and what I charge for it, then I'm not free in any sense. And that's precisely what Zohran Mamdani, who at this point should be categorized right alongside figures like Lenin and Stalin, has prescribed for the city of New York and the United States of America. This cancer, if allowed to metastasize, will not remain confined to New York City. It will spread, and human freedom will perish in its path. Fortunately, the American people last year elected President Donald Trump to a second term, and this president suffers no fools. He is holding nothing back here as he bluntly states actually how an un-American traitor should be handled.
Mr. President, your beloved New York City may well be led by a communist soon, Zohran Mamdani, who in his nomination speech said he will defy ICE and will not allow ICE to arrest criminal aliens in New York City. Your message to communist Zohran Mamdani.
Well, then we'll have to arrest him. Look, we don't need a communist in this country, but if we have one, I'm going to be watching over him very carefully on behalf of the nation. We send him money. We send him all the things that he needs to run a government. And by the way, they get about 3 times what you get, Ron. If you look at the per capita, Florida gets 1/3 of what New York gets in terms of the numbers. Why don't you give us those numbers?
Yeah, well,
because that's what we should send him.
Yeah, well, like sometimes people say Florida gets more because they count Social Security recipients, but that's not money to the state. Those are seniors that live here. If they moved to North Carolina, you could count it there. So it has no interaction with the state government. They get more in the city and state governments than we get.
Right, substantially. We're going to be watching that very carefully, and a lot of people are saying he's here illegally. We're going to look at everything, and ideally. He's going to turn out to be much less than a communist. But right now, he's a communist. That's not a socialist. I've always said, we will not have socialism in this country. In the speeches, I said, well, what? They skipped socialism. And you got a lot of them like that. And you see AOC, she's out there with her, bad IQ. She's out there ranting and raving about how wonderful he is. And look, so far he's winning. He still has a race to win, but so far he's winning, and he has an advantage as a Democrat in New York City. I was there a long time ago, and it was a long time since a Republican won the city. But you would think that a Republican would be able to win. Or you have a good independent running, Mayor Adams, who's a very good person. I helped him out a little bit. He had a problem, and he was unfairly hurt over this question. He made a statement to the effect that this is terrible. New York City can't have all these immigrants come in. And like he was indicted the following day. And I said, that was a phony indictment. And it was a phony indictment. That was a Biden indictment. I said, don't feel bad. I got indicted 5 times every time you opened your mouth. That was a bad group. That was a very dangerous group, I will tell you. These were not nice people. That was the only thing they could do. They had no policy. They had no skill. They had no anything. But they were very good at that. They were vicious, vicious, horrible people. Thank you very much.
Now, I can imagine how some people will react to this. My God, the President of the United States is threatening to arrest a duly elected mayor for his political views. But that's not what he said. The question Trump answered was, what's your message to Mamdani if he obstructs justice by interfering with federal law enforcement? And the answer was dead on correct and appropriate. If you break the law, no matter who you are, you will be held accountable. This is the way. Tonight, you can check out a podcast I did with Professor David Penn here in Minnesota. As soon as it's released, I'll edit the description to include the link. One of the things we talked about was the fact that American conservatives are sick and tired of political theater. They don't want another dramatic congressional hearing detailing all the horrible things that anti-American insurgents are doing to our country. They want arrests. They want offenders held accountable. And that's exactly what must happen in order to send the message to others that if you mess around, you will find out. Recall, during his 4 years between terms, Trump was targeted relentlessly with unsubstantiated civil and criminal prosecutions. The left was willing to put him in prison just for being Donald Trump. What I'm calling for here is not a tit for tat. I don't want anyone to be imprisoned for what they believe or what they say. But I do want people imprisoned for violating the law and engaging in treasonous activity that undermines the security and prosperity of the United States. And that's not subjective. That's not in the eye of the beholder. If you're interfering with federal immigration officers, that's a crime. It's on the books. It's not debatable. And it doesn't matter if you're an elected official or not. If you commit a crime, you should do the time. That's a fundamental principle of American governance. When I was elected as a state representative, it didn't place me on some unreachable pedestal or grant me the privilege to act outside of the law. And that's true of literally every other elected official at all levels throughout the United States. I expect that Mamdani will double down and defy federal authority if elected, and I hope that Trump follows through on his conviction to hold him accountable if and when that happens. Since the political assassinations of Minnesota Speaker Emerita Melissa Hortman and her husband, Mark, there has been a persistent and necessary conversation about the impact of political rhetoric on the culture. I myself have had somewhere around 6 media interviews in the past 2 weeks where members of the media have asked me about my own rhetorical choices. And my answers have been, if I may say so, humble reflections on the value of using incendiary language unless it's appropriate to a policy rather than a person. That said, there's another dimension to this conversation that I'm not sure the media is ready to explore. And that's the issue of how the substance of certain political agendas is inherently antagonistic and inflammatory. When you have someone like Zohran Mamdani out there saying he's going to seize the means of production and therefore enslave the population, is it reasonable to expect that people will just shrug that off and not react as if they're being threatened? I mean, if you tell me you're going to seize my property, you're going to limit my freedom, you're going to impose your tyrannical will, you're going to endanger my children, you're going to deny my right to live my life according to my own values, you're going to break the law and betray the Constitution of the United States. Like, if you tell me those things, what responsibility do I have to remain calm? We talk a lot about bringing down the temperature of the public discourse, but it's not just the discourse, it's the policy, it's the agenda. If you keep proposing to violate people's rights to endanger their children, to seize their property and take away their freedom, past a certain point you should expect an animated response. Now, political violence is not the answer. This is not 1776. We're not suffering under colonial rule. We have a system in place which was hard-won and has persisted for nearly 250 years that enables us to work out our differences through a representative process. But if we're going to go around accusing people of inciting violence for the language that we use, why not also examine the policies that we propose? Threatening someone is an incitement to violence. There's this concept in the law known as fighting words. If you threaten a man's wife in front of him, you don't get to complain when he lays you out on the deck. We should recognize that same principle in our political discourse, not as an excuse for violence, but as a provocation of it. Our public figures have a responsibility to not threaten the life, liberty, and property of American citizens, and that shouldn't be controversial. Yet, apparently it is. And that's an indictment of our culture. Yesterday, we discussed on the program an idea floated by the Heritage Foundation to change the way the census is counted. Specifically, the idea is to limit the count to American citizens and exclude non-citizens, including illegal immigrants. I didn't expect that to become headline news the next day, but that's exactly what happened when President Trump addressed the issue in this clip.
Bureau to redo the census to actually get an account of how many Americans with proof of citizenship are in our area, in our country, redistricting some of the House districts. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll speak for both of us. We love it. Okay, you're going to like this one. I know all about it. We want to bring our elections back. The election in 2020 was rigged, millions and millions of votes. It had to do with COVID and a lot of things, but it really had to do with the crooked people. The Democrats are very good at cheating on elections. And that's why I said too big to rig. They tried this one too. But after about 9:02, they gave up too many votes. Too big to rig. Ron would love it. I would love it. Christie would love it. That's what they have to do. They have to bring it back. And we have to look. Ron, they include anybody that happens to be in your state.
Well, California would lose like 5 seats if they did a fair census. And even beyond that, the Biden census gypped Florida of at least 1 seat. We only got 1 seat in the last census. Are you trying to tell me that Florida only had 1 seat in that? We should have had at least 2. Texas should have had another one. That could be the difference in the House of Representatives in the majority. So I would love for them to redo the census for 26. My legislature will redistrict those lines. We'll get it to where it's fair. But as it's right now, this country is not fairly apportioned.
As I said yesterday, while I have mixed feelings about the underlying rationale for this change, I do think it's the right move in a context where the negligence of the Biden administration has enabled tens of millions of illegal immigrants to flood into our country and dilute our electoral process. American elections should reflect the will of American citizens. Otherwise, what's the point of being one? What does it mean to be a citizen if literally anyone else in the world gets the same rights and privileges that you do? This move would be a no-brainer. That's it for today, unless you're an ex-subscriber, YouTube channel member, or audio podcast subscriber, in which case you can look in my feed for today's edition of The Smoke-Filled Room, my supporter-exclusive bonus show where I address culture and social issues. In today's episode, I contemplate the future of the pro-life movement amidst a culture which seems to have fully embraced abortion. Sure, Roe v. Wade was overturned, but that ruling hasn't changed hearts and minds. So how do we effectively support life moving forward, especially in a blue state like Minnesota? Well, I have some thoughts. Subscribe now for immediate access. Take care.